There is this sort of a need for a good look at where our risks are greatest, to do some sort of modelling work around our flood risk on a national scale.
Dr. Dean says this research would allow the country to come up with a plan to adapt to these changes. For Morning Report, Charlie Drever.
Now listening to that was Earthquake Commission Minister Megan Woods. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you make of the findings of that report? Anything surprise you, particularly maybe the hot spots that are more prevalent?
Well, I think they're the hot spots that have been in the news even this year in terms of where those cyclones are landing and where the damage to people's homes and lives are being. We're seeing that, so I don't think there's anything hugely surprising. But I think it's a really important report and it's very interesting, and it's certainly something that we need to be thinking about as we're planning for the future.
I mean, we're pretty vulnerable, aren't we? We're a vulnerable country. We hear about islands in the Pacific having all sorts of issues with rising sea levels, and we forget sometimes we're an island. We're a number of islands, but this fact that most of the claims are coming from places that are within 6 kilometres of the coast. What's your plan moving forward when we're seeing a rise in the frequency of these climate change induced or otherwise induced natural disasters?
So, and it's the intensity of the storms that we heard from Dr. Dean there as well that is causing the damage. That it's not necessarily the number, but we're certainly seeing the damage that is being caused by these storms on the increase. In terms of the plan going forward, what I think is that we need better integration with the work that the EQC is doing with Minister Shaw's Adaptation Technical Working Group, which the private insurers are actually involved in, which is assessing how it is that we make sure that we're protecting New Zealanders and their homes as we do experience more of these storms.
I mean, we actually cover more than I think what a lot of other countries cover, and this came out in the report. Since the year 2000, we've had almost 300 million being paid out, but almost 200 million of it is for the land damages. Most of other countries are paying for building damages and contents, but that's actually the minority in terms of what we're paying for. With the erosion of the coastline, I mean, how do you see the bill going up, and who's going to foot it?
Well, I think one of the things that land is covered by the Earthquake Commission to address the market failure, and that land isn't covered usually by private insurers. But what it does mean is it de-risks in terms of the international reinsurers a lot in their mind, the fact that we do have government guarantees underpinning it. And what the flow-on effect of that is, we have some of the highest rates of insurance against natural disasters in New Zealand of anywhere in the world, which is a really positive thing for us as a country as we do face these events, because it means that people can get on with their lives, get their homes fixed. But you're quite right that we do have this split between land and between buildings. And one of the things that EQC is working on at the moment, that of course often to repair a home, you've got to repair the land under a home before you can get on with the home. So that we're looking at what protocols we can put in place with the private insurers to make sure that we can coincide that work, so we're not kind of going back and forward.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. I mean, what people listening this morning, what they're going to be concerned about, they're going to remember the issues we've had after the earthquake in Christchurch, and the issues with EQC and private insurers and how people fell through the gap there. I mean, we're talking about a lot more people around the country now on the coast taking out insurance. I mean, what are you doing, and how do you see this playing out in terms of the private insurers' roles versus EQC?
Well, I think one of the things that we can look at, and look, I mean, it's been no secret that I've made my views on how we've handled many of the issues with the Canterbury claims over the last 7-8 years. But one of the things in terms of the changes we're putting in place in terms of how we manage claims, that's not just about Canterbury, that's about the whole country. So actually we're seeing in terms of this year's storm events, 70s, 80s, 90% settlement rates of those claims that have come through from those events. And one of the changes that I'm really pleased about that EQC has initiated is they're getting on the ground really early, day 2, to a place that's had an event. They're working really closely with the councils and with the local civil defence operators. One of the things, of course, with storm events as opposed to earthquakes is usually we have pretty good forecasting that they're coming. Very few of these cyclones are a surprise. We kind of have days leading up to it knowing they're coming. And in some cases they're actually getting there ahead of time and working with the local civil defence teams to make sure that there's a clear path for people when they do need to lodge their claims. So I think we were seeing good working together of the private insurers and EQC. They're working on this protocol for how it is that you repair the land under a house so you can get on with the business of repairing someone's house that sits on top of that land.
Okay, you're sounding very positive there, talking about claimants. One other other thing that comes out of this report is that 41% of claimants didn't get any money. Why are they being turned down? Have you looked at the data?
I haven't looked at that data in any depth, but that will be the question will be whether or not that's around their dwelling, their house. In that case, that will be a question for the private insurers, because as you've identified, they don't cover land. So there's a range of issues there. But look, the key thing with anything to do with EQC that I want to achieve is making sure that we're cutting out the back and forth between the insurers and EQC as much as we can. What we've seen in terms of the Kaikoura earthquakes, for example, is where people have been able to deal with one point of contact, go in and deal with that person, and it really should be immaterial to the person who's trying to rebuild their home and their life to get on with things.
Hey, thanks for your time. That's the Earthquake Commission Minister, Megan Woods, this morning. It's coming up to 9 minutes to 8.
And that debris we told you about a little bit earlier on the southbound lanes of the northern motorway in Auckland at Greville Road, that has now been cleared, but some delays in the area, queues back to McClymonts Road. Well, businesses in Christchurch in the suburb of